I'm about to do a series on Christian fiction, bagging on things like The Shack and the Left Behind series. But in doing the outlines and putting together the media, I realized I like some of this stuff better than the mainstream stuff that's coming out these days. And why is that? I mean, bigger budgets, better actors, not to mention the problems inherent to Christian fiction that I'll point out in the videos going forward. And I still enjoyed some of this stuff more than 90% of the secular books and movies I've seen in recent years. So how is that? How is it that just a few decades ago we could crank out movies like The Terminator that sticks with you for the rest of your life, same as the first sequel, but now we try to add another sequel onto the series and you can't even remember the names of the new characters, even a week later. I already did a series on the underlying issue in my Loss of Transcendence videos, pointing out how the modern world's refusal to think in metaphysical terms means even our storytelling tends to become formulaic and mechanical. But that's been going on for decades. It's just in the last few years that it seems like almost everything is just forgettable. Why did that happen? What are the stories of just the last few years suddenly leaving out? I think the answer is obvious, although it might surprise you. They're leaving out immaturity. I don't mean in the comedic sense, although hardly any of them seem to have a sense of humor anymore, and isn't that a coincidence? No, I mean in the simple sense of immature human beings. Consider a simple thought experiment. Let's take two train tracks. On the first track, you see a man tied up so he can't escape with a freight train barreling down on him. Why, you know this man. It's none other than the noted Tibetan Buddhist teacher Tenzin Gyatso. There, facing his death, this man simply stares at the train with a look of calm dispassion, as if he's been waiting for it all his life. And maybe he has. He's attained perfect Zen. For Tenzin, death is a kind of fulfillment. So, what do? Do you try and help him? Most people probably would, simply on principle. But what if you failed? I don't think too many tears would be shed. More than anything, it'd probably just be a learning experience for all of us. Now, what about the second set of tracks? On this one, tied down, you see 8-year-old Clarissa Kimberlin. You can see tears rolling down her face, but like the monk, she's not crying out. She's no stranger to hardship. You see, when Clarissa was 6, she suffered a bout of meningitis that left her with a nervous tick on the left side of her face. 2 years of physical therapy, and it's hardly noticeable now. But for the last 2 years, she's been the butt of every joke at her elementary school. They called her Egghead, because when she first came back from the hospital, she still had some cranial swelling. The other kids left pictures where she could find them that looked like Humpty Dumpty with long hair sitting at a school desk. Night after night, she hardly came out of her room. But just last week, she made her first friend with another little girl whose mother was a client of the same physical therapist. They played dolls, and then rode bikes over to the other girl's house where the mother made them chicken fingers while they watched Peter Pan. So there's a tiny bit of fulfillment in her mind too, because at least she finally got to feel like a normal little girl, if only just for 1 week. But she's not a Zen master. Neither are her parents. They're about to be destroyed. It's been hard enough for them blaming themselves that they don't have enough money to homeschool her or to afford a tutor. Now this. And just think about it. What would you be willing to sacrifice to stop the train from hitting Clarissa? And once you've answered that question, you've hit upon the key difference between storytelling and the power it had to move us since time immemorial and the kinds of stories we tell ourselves now. For my part, at least half the movies I see these days feature what we would call a strong female lead. And if it's an action story, they all stand in the shadow of the ultimate strong female lead, the one none of us can forget, Sigourney Weaver's Ripley. The thing most of us do forget is that Ripley wasn't just in one movie. She was in 4, if my memory serves me. And you can try and argue that the first movie defined her character, but I don't remember anybody talking about Ripley after the first movie came out. We all just talked about how scary it was with those long, excruciating scenes as you waited for the alien to strike. No, it's the second movie that defined her. Not because they changed her. No, it's because they added their version of 8-year-old Clarissa. They added Newt. And then they placed a little nude on a set of train tracks, and they made Ripley duct tape a bunch of guns together and strap herself into a mechanical loader to get the girl clear from the train. And we may not remember a single line from the most recent Terminator movie, but if you've seen Aliens, even if you only saw it 30 years ago, there's a really good chance you can quote what Ripley said when she first emerged in that loader, word for word. But, you say, what about the first Terminator movie? There were no kids in the first Terminator movie. True, but I didn't say kids. I said immaturity. In the first Terminator movie, Sarah Connor is Clarissa. She's the one on the train tracks, and her protector from the future, Reese, is trying to get her off. Through most of the movie, she's utterly childlike in the way she responds to the threats around her, until the end. By then, she's become a battle-hardened veteran who accepts what Reese is telling her, which is that she has to stay alive to get the rest of humanity off the train tracks of the future. Now, for the second movie, she can't be Clarissa anymore. She's too tough, too mature. So they had to add another one, Sarah's son, John. And then he's the one on the tracks, with Sarah and Arnie trying to save him. The reason this affects us so deeply is simple: our biology. Like so many other living creatures, we have an innate desire to protect the young of our species. That programming, our programming, is clearly not just tied to external signs of youth, but tied to a lack of maturity in general. When we see flawed human beings who at least have the possibility of growth, we naturally want to see them live and grow. And so they don't even have to be young, just flawed. A good example of this is the 80s version of The Thing. They're all men, they're all adults, but they're also flawed, imperfect creatures who argue and bicker and scream because they don't want to die. Of course, the simplest and most pervasive example of this phenomenon is the female leads of so many classic horror films, which we didn't call strong female leads back then. We called them scream queens, because when the monster showed up, that's what they did. And this one checked a lot of boxes by, one, giving us that vulnerable lack of maturity that made us feel protective and so engage us in the storyline, as we suddenly had a real interest that no harm come to this girl, along with, two, the looks for eye candy, and so the guys could invest themselves as they imagined saving her. But now, what do we have besides vulnerable, at some level immature characters? Well, now we get representation, which Hollywood loves as it tries to appeal to every possible market and tries even harder to show how politically correct it can be. But if you're going for that angle, then you're not going for immaturity. No, you go down that rabbit hole and you're going to convince yourself that what your audience really wants is not just itself represented. What they really want is to see themselves idealized. You know, the perfect possible version of themselves. Strong, attractive. Sure, the monster is after them, but so what? All they have to do is believe in themselves, and that monster is going down. It never should have messed with all 110 pounds of their strong, independent confidence. Now, this feature can be hard to pull out of the overall mess, since usually a movie that is that ignorant of human nature is going to make 100 other mistakes as well. But what about a movie that gets pretty much everything else right? To a point. The 2018 movie Annihilation gets all sorts of things right. Has beautiful effects, decent acting, the script has its moments. The overall Lovecraftian cosmic horror angle is done in an intriguing, compelling way. What is the alien intelligence? Why does it affect things so differently? Can it even be understood, let alone stopped? And watch the movie and you'll ask those questions. Then you'll forget those questions and that you ever even saw the movie in just a few days. Because the main characters are all idealized. They're strong-ish, attractive, self-sufficient. No scream queens in this movie. Why would they? Having attained cosmic oneness like our Zen master, apparently. I mean, why else would they be so blasé about everything? Husband shows up all weirded out. Well, it's kind of a douche anyway. World ending. Oh, that's too bad. End of all life as you know it? Well, you know. What really is life anyway? This movie needs its Newt, its Clarissa, in the worst possible way. And everybody needs to step off that idealized bandwagon and rejoin the human race in all of its flawed messiness. But it almost seems like people have suddenly forgotten that that's what we all are, flawed and messy. Hollywood can't even do kids right anymore. They aren't kids. Even they don't seem immature, just more idealized garbage. Just a bunch of Zen masters staring out at the world with quiet dispassion, except, unlike our Tibetan monk, they didn't attain this wisdom through hard practice. No, this is just nonsensical wish fulfillment. So there's not even a lesson. And so all of us just watch, unmoved, forgetting them as soon as we saw them. Set against that, even the problems in Christian fiction I'm about to go over, I'm not sure are really that bad. This is David Reichert from The Bunker. Hit like and subscribe and click the notification bell, and we'll try and put out at least one video a week. Also, our pandemic horror series, The Holocaust Engine, is available September 14th. Link for pre-order down below.